Hello everybody and welcome back to another video from the Theory of Racelessness. Before the clip, we have some very exciting news. Dr. Sheena Mason, Dr. Carlos HOYT, and Greg Thomas present Resolving the Racism Dilemma, a full-day conference coming up this September 24th, 2022. Register using the link in the description box down below to experience these leading voices as they explore and discuss how to correct the misguided notions of race. Now, enjoy the video.
They're participating in that, and it's to them, it's not mimicking, it's part of their culture, it's part of who they are. I think of the American context similarly, because I think about how Barbara and Karen Fields talk about this in Racecraft. They talk about how even during times of legalized segregation, it was sort of presumed, or it gives this the appearance, the language, the way that we talk about it gives the appearance of racialized white and Black people not really being in contact with one another. And they tell parts of history where it's like, no, we're in contact with one another, right? Even working in racialized white people's houses oftentimes, and all of that. And so there is an intimacy among groups that I think is important in recognizing the sort of cultural formation that I'm talking about and the ethnic formation that I'm talking about. If people believe in the concept of race, there is a lot of mixing, I would say, to the complete disruption of how people conceive of race. If Walter White and Jean Toomer, Charles Chestnut can look like racialized white men and their parents and grandparents were enslaved people, to me, white people don't even exist. So let's talk about that. And the list goes on. I think we're hybrid in every regard. And while there are certainly pockets of American society that are going to be distinct, the distinctness is really regional, or it's regional, or it's class based, right? And that those differences needn't have a hierarchy. They needed to be hierarchized. I don't know if that's a word. They didn't have a hierarchy, but because we assign race categories to it, the hierarchy is there. And I think without the race category, there might still be a hierarchy because some people don't look kindly upon people of different classes, right? But I don't think it's going to carry the violence of racism.
So I do think that it would be worthwhile, or at least for me, I think there's a distinction in saying that the origin and the formation of a culture at any given point, its history is mulatto, its history is Creole. But at any point in the timeline, when we hop in, we see that while that's its origins, and I'm fine, I support always being aware of it. For example, Netflix a while back had a great documentary on like the birth of kind of hip hop in New York, and many of the first DJs or MCs who were known were referencing how, say, like white writers like Simon Garfunkel that their mom liked, affected what they did. That's the history of it. But at any given point, we see that not everyone freely practices that culture, that it's being, policed at that point. I'm not saying that this augments what you're saying, but these are two different things, because I feel that you can recognize, and you should, that how we got this, we're speaking English, we're participating in this, we're pulling from all these different cultures, but then people are also dealing with the reality that like not everyone is, say, participating in sneaker or skateboard culture. Not everyone is also interested in, a street aesthetic. Not everyone is interested in, say, like the most hyperized version of American individuality. At any given point, we do draw, say, lines for who's participating in the culture, even as it's true that it's mixed. I only bring that up just because, like, sometimes when I hear people, not necessarily you, but talk about the different origins, it almost feels like What's left out of the story, though, is that for a long portion of my life, if I walked around, I could see that only certain people were participating in a culture freely, and that every once in a while there'd be, like, say, an interloper into that culture, but normally they were treated as an interloper and they experienced pushback. So there was this combination of mixed origins, but at any specific point. And I focus on this specific point because I'm sure 15 years from now, the cultures will drift in various ways and there'll be different boundaries and there'll be different mixings. But at that point, they'll quite possibly be policed again.
Yeah. And I think that's, if it's unclear, I think that's all part of racialist ideology. And I say racialist to signify the sameness of racial and racism, this idea that of cultural appropriation and all of those things along particular lines is code for policing, gatekeeping, all of the things. And in as much as we can understand it to be gatekeeping this thing called Blackness with very nefarious intent, it also gatekeeps this thing that's presumed, these things that are presumed to be whiteness with very nefarious intent and outcomes. And that's the downside of viewing any of it as racial. So my contention isn't that we have to look at the culture as being all the same. It's looking at culture in the way that it actually forms as being indicative of difference. And that the difference needn't have hierarchy or carry a hierarchy, but that because we racialize those cultural differences, it does help perpetuate the problem of racism. And that is my only contention. And I don't have all the solves and say, oh, well, use this word instead of that word. I think American gets us further than we might initially think in a single conversation. But outside of American, I mean, part of me wonders if region would be helpful, because, that's not dissimilar from what people already do when they call themselves a New Yorker. You understand that New Yorker is like New York City, not New York State, and Texan or Houstonian or whatever, San Franciscan, that might be a thing. Region might be more helpful, because there's a way in which, too, I think certain zip codes, certain places, certain regions are typically understood or thought to be racialized in particular ways. So even with the absence of what I would call race specific, if we focused on region or place to talk about culture or a particular happening, I get the sense that you would find some amount of satisfaction and specificity without upholding the thing. And
we hope you enjoyed that highlight. To watch the full version, use the link in the description box down below. Before we go, here's another reminder for Resolving the Racism Dilemma with Dr. Sheena Mason, Dr. Carlos HOYT, and Greg Thomas. We highly encourage you check out the great things being offered at this conference, September 24th. All of the conference information is linked down below. We hope to see you there.